North Carolina is known for its lush orchards, rolling hills, and quiet farmland. But beneath the idyllic scenery lies a darker story. Scattered across the state are orchard farms haunted by moving shadows, whispering winds, and the unseen presence of those who never left. Tonight, we will explore 25 of North Carolina's most haunted orchard farms, where shadows move without explanation, whispers echo through the branches, and the very ground seems to remember every sorrowful event that has occurred there. Whispering Apple Farm, located on the outskirts of Hendersonville, is a place where the ordinary rhythms of life give way to something far more mysterious. Visitors report an unsettling presence here, shadows that dart silently between apple trees at dusk, moving with an awareness that seems almost alive. The air grows inexplicably cold, even on still evenings, and gusts sweep through the orchard carrying faint whispers and distant laughter. Sounds that seem to come from no one yet from everywhere at once. Guests often report glimpsing fleeting figures at the edge of vision, shapes that move with a deliberate rhythm. Some appear humanoid, darting between trees as though playing hide-and-seek, while others are darker and more abstract, bending and stretching unnaturally through the fading light. Whenever approached, the shadows vanish, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the lingering chill of a passing gust. The orchard itself seems to hold memory within its rows, replaying echoes of lives that once tended its trees. The whispers and laughter are among the farm's most haunting features. Visitors have described the sounds as fragmented snippets of conversation, laughter, or cries, disjointed and elusive. At times, the whispers seem to call names, repeating them softly and drawing listeners deeper into the orchard. The laughter carries a paradoxical tone, playful, yet tinged with sorrow, as if recalling moments of joy long gone. Some visitors have followed the sounds, only to find the source impossible to locate, leaving them with a lingering sense of unease and the feeling of being quietly observed. Cold gusts add to the orchard's unnerving presence. They move unpredictably, brushing past shoulders, rattling branches, and sweeping leaves across the ground. The gusts often coincide with the movements of shadows, making it feel as though the air itself responds to unseen activity. Even on evenings without wind, these sudden chills remind visitors that the farm is alive in its own mysterious way, a place where the ordinary rules of perception no longer apply. Whispering Apple Farm leaves a profound impression on those who venture within. The combination of fleeting shadows, whispered voices, and chilling gusts creates an environment where the line between reality and memory blurs. Some leave feeling a deep, haunting curiosity, compelled to return, while others retreat quietly, unsettled by the presence that lingers among the trees. The farm endures as a place where past and present coexist, where shadows move with purpose, whispers carry unseen messages, and distant laughter echoes endlessly through the rows of forgotten apple trees. Crimson Orchard, perched on the outskirts of Asheville, is a place where the line between the living and the spectral blurs beneath the canopy of twisted apple and cherry trees. Once a thriving orchard known for its rich, blood-red fruit, the farm now stands abandoned, its rows of trees gnarled and overgrown, their branches tangled in perpetual shadow. Crimson Orchard is not merely quiet, it is alive with lingering presence, a space where the past seems to replay itself, and every gust of wind carries whispers of long-forgotten labor and life. Approaching Crimson Orchard, travelers first notice the stillness. Even in daylight, a thick haze clings to the property, softening the outlines of the twisted trees and casting the distant barns into near obscurity. As dusk settles, the mist deepens and the orchard takes on a surreal quality. Figures begin to emerge, often appearing at the edge of vision, gliding silently between rows of trees. Some are vaguely human, others stretched or distorted, their forms flickering like candlelight through the branches. Visitors report that these figures always seem aware of being watched, pausing or shifting slightly when observed, only to dissolve into shadow when approached. The trees of Crimson Orchard play a central role in its haunting. Their twisted trunks and tangled branches form natural corridors, creating spaces where light barely penetrates and shadows stretch unnaturally. Visitors have seen silhouettes moving along these corridors, sometimes pacing, sometimes reaching toward the air as if handling invisible tools or fruit. One observer described watching a figure vanish into the branches, just as he thought he could step forward to touch it, leaving only the chill of a passing gust and the faint scent of apples. Others report figures flitting between trees in seemingly choreographed patterns, moving along paths that no living soul could know, repeating routines that may have once belonged to the orchard's caretakers. Tools left behind in Crimson Orchard add to the unsettling atmosphere. Pruning, shears, ladders, baskets, and rakes often appear shifted from their original positions, as though someone or something has moved them while no one is looking. A visitor recounts stepping into a shed and finding a pruning hook suspended mid-air, slowly tilting as if adjusted by invisible hands. Another reported seeing baskets of apples overturned in the orchard, their contents scattered across the ground with no sign of human presence. But is actively engaged in a ritualistic repetition of daily tasks from years long past. A phantom labor that never truly ended. The orchard is not silent. The faint rustle of leaves in the branches often carries the impression of movement beyond what is visible. Whispers rise in the fog, sometimes repeating names, sometimes fragments of instructions or warnings, like echoes of caretakers long gone. These sounds often appear in response to movement, as if the orchard itself is aware of intrusions. The orchard paths contribute to its disorienting nature. Worn tracks and overgrown trails wind unpredictably through the dense rows of trees, often appearing subtly altered when retraced. Visitors report that what seemed like a straight path when entering twists and bends unexpectedly on the way back. Shadows follow or intersect these paths, figures gliding silently between branches or vanishing behind trunks, creating a constant sense of being observed. The fog thickens and shifts in response, sometimes revealing a hidden corner or obscuring a familiar tree, heightening the sensation that the orchard exists outside ordinary perception. Local lore suggests that Crimson Orchard's hauntings stem from both tragedy and devotion. The orchard was abandoned after a series of accidents and misfortunes claimed lives of caretakers and family members. Tools, labor, and the cycles of planting and harvesting left lingering impressions on the land, persisting in spectral form. Shadows are interpreted as echoes of those who once worked tirelessly among the trees, endlessly performing their tasks. Tools that shift on their own are seen as reminders of human presence, the lingering effort of hands that no longer exist. The whispers, laughter, and rustling of branches all carry the residue of past life, looping in endless repetition for those who enter the orchard. Some return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity or the desire to witness the orchard's spectral activity firsthand, while others leave quietly, unsettled by the pervasive observation of unseen eyes. Crimson Orchard leaves a lasting impression, a place where memory endures. Shadows move with intent, and the past manifests through tools, trees, and the very fog that blankets the land. In Crimson Orchard, figures appear among twisted trees. Tools shift without explanation, and whispers echo faintly on gusts of wind. The gnarled orchard, fog-laden paths, and spectral forms create a space where perception is challenged, memory lingers, and unseen presences watch every step. Shadows move deliberately, tools rearrange themselves, and whispers carry fragments of past life, leaving visitors with a lasting sense of mystery, unease, and the haunting presence that defines Crimson Orchard. Misty Hollow Farm, tucked away in the rolling hills of Boone, is a place where the landscape seems suspended in a perpetual twilight, and the line between the living and the spectral is barely perceptible. Once a thriving homestead known for its orchards, fields, and livestock, the farm now stands abandoned. Its barns sagging, fences broken, and pastures overgrown with weeds. Visitors to Misty Hollow frequently report ghostly shapes weaving silently between the trees, fleeting forms that vanish the moment they are approached. Whispers rise suddenly in the wind, carrying a chorus of long-lost voices. Fragments of conversations, laughter, and warnings from a past that refuses to rest. The farm is not simply empty. It is alive with echoes, a place where memories of lives once lived linger. In the mist, watching silently, and sometimes interacting with those who dare to wander too far into its veiled landscape. Approaching the farm, travelers first notice the thick fog that hangs over the fields and tree lines. Even in bright daylight, the mist clings stubbornly to the orchard rows, the crumbling barns, and the worn paths leading to the house. As evening descends, the fog thickens, turning the farm into a labyrinth of shifting shadows and soft gray light. Within this haze, ghostly shapes begin to emerge, moving with deliberate intent. Visitors describe figures darting between the trees, gliding along paths, or pausing near the edges of open fields. Some appear vaguely human, while others are distorted, stretched, or blurred by the mist, giving the sense that the land itself has taken on a life of its own. When approached, these figures vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a cold draft, a rustle of leaves, or the faint echo of a whisper. Visitors report seeing ghostly shapes weaving along these corridors, sometimes repeating actions that suggest long-forgotten routines, tending to trees, walking along invisible paths, or pausing to glance back at something unseen. One observer described a figure gliding between two large apple trees, stopping as though to adjust a branch, then disappearing into the fog before he could reach it. Another visitor reported watching multiple shadows moving in unison, passing silently through the mist, as if performing a ritual from a time before memory. Whispers and distant sounds are another defining aspect of Misty Hollow Farm. The voices are sometimes faint and indistinct, other times startlingly clear, forming a chorus that seems to echo from multiple directions at once. Visitors have reported hearing fragments of conversations, half-formed phrases, and occasional laughter, all of which feel both intimate and alien. Some hear their own names softly spoken, as if called by unseen figures, while others catch phrases like "watch the path" or "don't go further," leaving them unnerved and disoriented. The sounds are not constant, but appear in unpredictable bursts, giving the impression that the farm is aware of those who wander through it, responding subtly to presence and movement. The pathways between the trees and fields contribute to the sense of disorientation that permeates Misty Hollow. Trails wind unpredictably through the orchard and pastures, often seeming subtly altered when retraced. Visitors have reported that familiar paths twist unexpectedly, corners shift, and shadows appear in unexpected locations. Figures continue to move along these paths, pacing endlessly or gliding silently between trees, giving the impression that they are following invisible routes preserved in the memory of the land itself. The fog thickens around these forms, curling and shifting as if guided by the figure's presence, enhancing the sense that the farm exists outside ordinary perception. Local legend attributes the haunting of Misty Hollow Farm to both tragedy and devotion. Families abandoned the farm decades ago, leaving behind homes, tools, and orchards. Lives were lost to accidents, illness, and misfortune. And the lingering energy of their daily routines has imprinted itself on the land. The ghostly shapes are believed to be echoes of former residents, endlessly repeating gestures, motions, and routines that were never completed. The whispers carry fragments of speech, emotion, and memory, looping endlessly through the mist. Paranormal researchers have noted recurring patterns. Shadows regularly appear in certain orchards and clearings. Whispers emerge from consistent locations, and the fog thickens in response to movement, suggesting that the land itself preserves the memory of those who once lived and worked there. Visitors often leave Misty Hollow Farm with an indelible sense of unease. Many recall the fleeting shapes moving through the trees, the whispers carried by the wind, or the ghostly laughter echoing long after they have departed. Some return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity, fascination, or the desire to witness the farm's spectral activity firsthand. Others quietly retreat, unsettled by the knowledge that unseen eyes follow their every step, and that the past persists in the mist. Misty Hollow Farm leaves a lasting impression, a place where time feels suspended, memory endures, and the presence of unseen watchers lingers among trees, pathways, and the ever-shifting fog. At Misty Hollow Farm, ghostly shapes weave between twisted trees, whispers rise on gusts of wind, and laughter from the past echoes softly through the mist. The gnarled orchards, fog-laden trails, and spectral figures create an environment where perception is challenged, memory lingers, and unseen presences watch every movement. Shadows glide deliberately, whispers carry fragments of lives long gone, and the land itself seems aware of those who wander through it. Shadow Pines Orchard, nestled just outside Hickory, is a place where the ordinary world feels suspended and the atmosphere is thick with unease. Visitors to Shadow Pines often report a profound sense of being watched as they walk among the branches. Shadows move independently of the wind, darting from tree to tree, flickering at the edges of perception, vanishing whenever approached. The orchard is no longer merely a collection of trees and pathways. It is a landscape alive with the echoes of its past. A place where unseen eyes follow each step, and the air itself seems imbued with memory. Approaching Shadow Pines, travelers are struck first by the heavy silence that blankets the orchard. Within this fog, figures begin to appear, sometimes fleeting, sometimes lingering just long enough to be noticed. Visitors describe the shadows as moving with intent, not like the natural sway of branches in the wind, but like entities with purpose, pacing silently between trees, disappearing and reappearing along the rows. Some are vaguely human in form, others stretched, distorted, or blurred, their outlines dancing across the mist as if the orchard itself breathes them into existence. The trees of Shadow Pines are at the heart of the haunting. Their twisted, leafless branches form skeletal corridors, paths where shadows flit and linger. Visitors have reported seeing ghostly forms weaving among the trunks, moving along invisible paths or pausing as though engaged in tasks long forgotten. One observer recounted watching a figure glide between two trees, its movements deliberate, almost meticulous, before it disappeared into the fog without a sound. Another described multiple shadows darting in synchronized patterns, crossing paths in ways that seemed impossible, as if following routines etched into the orchard's memory. Every visitor senses that the orchard responds to their presence, shadows adjusting, pausing, or retreating, giving the impression that the land itself is aware of their intrusion. The sensation of being watched is relentless. Guests frequently report an invisible gaze tracking their every movement, shadows appearing at the periphery of vision, then vanishing when attention is focused. The feeling intensifies at the edge of the orchard, where trees cluster densely and paths become narrow. Visitors often hear the soft rustle of leaves, faint footsteps, or a whisper that seems carried on the breeze. though no one else is present. Some report hearing distant, indistinct voices, fragments of conversation, laughter, or even admonishments, rising and fading with the wind. The whispers are not constant, but appear suddenly, startling and intimate, heightening the sense that the orchard itself observes, records, and reacts to those who enter its bounds. The pathways through shadow pines are disorienting. Worn trails twist unpredictably, bordered by overgrown shrubs and fallen branches. Visitors report that familiar paths sometimes shift subtly when retraced. Corners appear where none existed, and shadows dart along trees in patterns that seem preordained. Figures move along these trails, pacing endlessly or flitting between trunks, as if retracing the motions of caretakers long gone. The mist thickens in response to movement, swirling to obscure or reveal figures, giving the impression that the orchard bends reality itself, shaping perception and disorienting anyone who attempts to navigate it unprepared. Local lore holds that Shadow Pines Orchard is haunted by echoes of both life and tragedy. Families who once lived and worked here disappeared gradually over decades, leaving behind homes, tools, and the orchard itself. Accidents, illnesses, and unfulfilled routines imbued the land with lingering energy, preserved in the form of shadows and whispers. Spectral figures are said to be the remnants of these former residents, endlessly repeating motions, tasks, or gestures that were never completed. Shadows dart independently of the wind, but their movements seem purposeful, rooted in memory rather than randomness. Whispered voices carry fragments of speech, emotion, and instruction, looping endlessly through the mist. A chorus of lives that persist beyond their mortal existence. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns. Specific rows of trees host the same shadowy figures. Certain paths provoke whispers, or the sense of being watched. Visitors leave Shadow Pines Orchard with a lingering sense of unease. Many recall the fleeting shadows, the feeling of invisible eyes following each step, or whispers that rise unexpectedly on gusts of wind. Some return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity or fascination, hoping to witness the orchard's spectral activity firsthand. Others quietly retreat, unsettled by the persistent presence of unseen observers and the orchard's uncanny responsiveness. Shadow Pines leaves an indelible impression, a place where time feels suspended, memory endures, and the unseen watchers move silently among the twisted branches, ever vigilant. In Shadow Pines Orchard, ghostly shapes glide between gnarled trees. Shadows move independently of the wind, and whispers drift on sudden gusts, carrying fragments of conversation, laughter, and warning. The twisted orchard, mist-laden paths, and spectral forms create a landscape where perception is challenged, memory persists, and unseen presences watch every motion. Shadows dart with intent, the fog reacts to movement, and whispers echo remnants of lives long past, leaving every visitor with a lasting sense of mystery, unease, and the haunting presence that defines Shadow Pines Orchard. Old Mill Orchard, located on the outskirts of Statesville, is a place where the weight of history presses heavily against the present, leaving the air thick with a sense of lingering life. Once a prosperous farm known for its crisp apples and bustling orchards, it now stands abandoned, the barns sagging, fences splintered, and rows of trees overgrown and twisted. Visitors report seeing shadowy figures of past workers moving silently through the fields, performing tasks long abandoned. Cold drafts sweep over those who wander between the apple trees, chilling the air unexpectedly, and apples sometimes roll across the ground as if guided by invisible hands. Old Mill Orchard is far from empty. It is a landscape where memory lingers, and the presence of the past reaches out to anyone who dares to enter. Approaching the orchard, visitors are struck by the quiet that hangs over the property. Even during the day, a soft mist drifts along the rows of apple trees, blurring the edges of barns and fading the horizon. As dusk falls, the orchard becomes shrouded in fog, and shadows begin to move along the tree lines. Figures appear along the fields, often partially obscured by branches or mist. Some seem human, dressed in the work clothes of a bygone era, while others are distorted, their shapes flickering like reflections in broken glass. Visitors often report that these figures move deliberately, pacing between the trees or tending to invisible crops, yet vanish completely when approached. The orchard itself seems aware of those who enter, guiding or revealing figures in ways that defy natural explanation. The apple trees play a central role in the haunting. Whether tending to trees, walking between rows, or pausing to inspect the ground, the movements are repetitive. The air is often thick with a scent of apples, decaying leaves, and damp earth, a sensory reminder of the orchard's former vitality. They are not carried by wind or weather, but seem tied to the presence of figures or the movement of the shadows. These cold touches heighten the sense of unease, giving the impression that the orchard is alive, moving with unseen energies that respond to presence and observation. One witness recounted stepping onto a path where an apple had rolled to a stop at his feet, only to watch it move again in the opposite direction as he tried to pick it up. Nightfall Orchard, nestled deep within the rolling hills of Henderson County, is a place where the ordinary rhythms of life seem suspended, replaced by an atmosphere thick with unease and unseen activity. Once a thriving apple orchard, known for its crisp fruit and sun-drenched autumns, the land now lies abandoned. Its rows overgrown, fences splintered, and barns decaying under the weight of time. Visitors to Nightfall Orchard often report hearing footsteps crunching on dry leaves when no one is present. Shadows shift just at the edge of vision, fleeting forms that vanish the moment they are observed. The orchard is alive in ways both subtle and unnerving. A landscape haunted by echoes of the past and by the presence of unseen observers that seem to exist between the trees and the mist. As one approaches the orchard, the first impression is of stillness that feels unnatural. Even during daylight, a faint haze clings to the orchard, softening the edges of twisted branches and fading the horizon. Walking between the rows of apple trees, visitors often feel a constant, unshakable sense of being watched. Shadows move independently of the wind, flitting between trees or lingering in corners where sunlight barely penetrates. These forms are often described as humanoid, yet indistinct. Blurred by distance or obscured by fog, their movements deliberate rather than random. Many who have wandered the orchard report glimpsing figures out of the corner of their eye, figures that disappear instantly when attention is focused directly on them. The trees themselves form narrow corridors that amplify the sense of unease. Visitors have reported seeing ghostly figures pacing along these corridors, moving as if tending to invisible fruit or following invisible paths. Some observers describe multiple shapes moving in tandem, almost as though the orchard itself preserves the routines of those who once worked there. Even in the absence of wind, leaves rustle, branches sway, and footsteps seem to echo along paths where no living person walks. The orchard is alive with memory, its very soil and trees carrying the imprint of decades of labor and life. Footsteps on dry leaves are one of the most commonly reported phenomena at Nightfall Orchard. These sounds are unnervingly precise, matching the pace and weight of human movement, yet no one is there. Guests have described hearing crunching footsteps following them along the rows, sometimes stopping when they stop, starting again when they move. Others have noted the footsteps coming from behind or from completely different directions, always just out of sight. The effect is deeply disorienting, as if the orchard itself is testing the boundaries of perception, making every step uncertain and every shadow suspect. The footsteps are accompanied by the faintest whispering at times, voices that trail off as quickly as they appear. Fragments of conversation from decades past, repeated endlessly by unseen presences. They move independently of the wind, darting from tree to tree, gliding along the ground, or lingering near trunks before vanishing entirely. Visitors often feel these forms tracking them, following silently as they navigate the overgrown paths. Some shadows seem to react to movement, pausing or retreating when approached, while others appear to anticipate the visitor's path, cutting across the line of sight with preternatural awareness. These phenomena create a persistent sense of unease, making it impossible to ignore the feeling that the orchard itself is alive, observing, and perhaps even guiding the actions of those who enter its bounds. The orchard's pathways contribute further to the disorientation experienced by visitors. Familiar paths seem subtly altered when retraced, corners shift, and shadows appear in places they were not before. The mist thickens unpredictably along the trails, sometimes obscuring the view entirely, other times revealing fleeting figures just beyond reach. Visitors report losing their sense of direction or time, feeling as if they are walking in loops, with the orchard rearranging itself around them. This shifting landscape reinforces the sensation that the orchard is not only haunted but conscious, responding to the presence of those who wander within it. Accidents, illness, and misfortune claimed lives, leaving behind unfinished routines and lingering energy. Shadowy figures are thought to be imprints of these former caretakers, endlessly repeating gestures and tasks that were never completed. The footsteps on dry leaves, the whispering voices, and the darting shadows are considered traces of these presences. Subtle, yet unmistakable reminders that the past persists. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns, Certain rows of trees regularly host figures. Shadows often follow the same invisible paths, and the orchard's mist and movement seem to respond to human presence. Visitors leave Nightfall Orchard with a lingering sense of unease, carrying memories of shadows gliding between trees, footsteps on dry leaves, and whispers drifting through the mist. Some are drawn back repeatedly, fascinated by the orchard's spectral activity, hoping to witness the elusive figures firsthand. Others quietly retreat, unsettled by the persistent feeling of being watched and the orchard's inexplicable responsiveness. Nightfall Orchard leaves an indelible impression, a place where memory lingers. Perception is tested, and unseen presences move silently among the twisted apple trees and fog-laden paths. At Nightfall Orchard, ghostly figures glide through overgrown rows. Footsteps echo on dry leaves with no visible source, and shadows vanish the moment they are directly observed. The orchard, abandoned yet alive with lingering presences, creates an environment where perception is challenged, memory persists, and unseen watchers track every movement. Shadows dart deliberately, whispers float on the wind, and the orchard itself seems conscious, leaving every visitor with a profound sense of mystery, unease, and the haunting presence that defines Nightfall Orchard. Bloodwood Farm, tucked away on the outskirts of Wilkesboro, is a place where the ordinary rhythms of life give way to a lingering, unnerving stillness. Once a thriving farm, known for its expansive fields and dense groves, it now lies abandoned, the buildings weathered and cracked, the fences splintered, and the land overgrown with wild grass and twisted trees. Visitors report eerie whispers that drift across the fields, rising from the shadows even on windless nights, and rustling noises that echo through the empty barns and groves. Figures appear along the tree lines, humanoid yet indistinct, gliding silently and vanishing when approached. Bloodwood Farm is more than a collection of fields and structures. It is a place haunted by the echoes of its past, a land where unseen watchers move silently through the shadows, observing all who dare to enter. Approaching Bloodwood Farm, visitors are struck by the heavy, oppressive silence that blankets the property. Even on clear days, a faint haze seems to cling to the tree lines, blurring the outlines of barns, sheds, and distant hills. It is during these hours that the first glimpses of figures appear, shadowy forms, moving along the edges of groves or pacing the fields. Some are vaguely human, appearing to wear the faded clothing of long-past workers. Others are distorted, blurred, or elongated, flickering as if caught between dimensions. When approached, these figures vanish without a trace, leaving behind only the chill of a sudden draft or the faint scent of earth and vegetation disturbed. Their gnarled branches twist into unnatural shapes, forming corridors that seem to guide visitors along paths not found on any map. Shadows flit between trunks, moving independently of the wind, weaving and darting in patterns that suggest purpose rather than randomness. Guests often report seeing multiple forms moving together, pacing silently as if tending to unseen crops or performing tasks long forgotten. Even when the air is still, leaves rustle and branches creak as if brushed by unseen hands, giving the impression that the farm itself is alive and aware, responding to the presence of outsiders with subtle, spectral gestures. Eerie whispers are a defining feature of Bloodwood Farm. They are faint at first, almost imperceptible, drifting on the air like fragments of conversation. Visitors have reported hearing names called softly, warnings issued in a voice that seems familiar, yet impossible to identify. The whispers sometimes rise into unintelligible murmurs or faint laughter, echoing across the fields and groves, before fading suddenly into silence. Even on nights without wind, the rustling of leaves accompanies these whispers, creating a sensation that the land itself is speaking, carrying messages from a time long gone. Guests describe the sound as both distant and intimate, close enough to provoke goosebumps, yet never clearly located, enhancing the orchard's mysterious and unnerving atmosphere. The open fields and tree lines of Bloodwood Farm add to the sense of disorientation. Overgrown pathways twist unpredictably, bordered by tall grass and wild underbrush, and familiar landmarks often appear subtly altered when retraced. Shadows flit along these paths, pacing or gliding silently, vanishing when observed, creating a persistent sense that visitors are being guided or perhaps herded by unseen entities. Some witnesses have reported seeing forms retreating into the edges of woods, only to reappear further down the field, seemingly moving faster than any human could. Others note that the mist and fog that gather over the land shift in response to movement, thickening to obscure certain figures, or clearing to reveal fleeting silhouettes at just the right distance, amplifying the farm's disorienting and uncanny qualities. Local lore suggests that the haunting of Bloodwood Farm is the result of decades of human activity, labor, and tragedy. Farmers, workers, and families who once inhabited the land are said to have left echoes of themselves behind, lingering as spirits tied to the orchard, fields, and groves. Accidents, hardships, and untimely deaths are woven into the very soil, creating a landscape dense with residual energy. The figures observed by visitors are often interpreted as these lingering presences, endlessly repeating routines, pacing along paths they walked in life, and appearing along tree lines where they once worked. Rustling leaves, sudden gusts, and whispering voices are manifestations of these spirits. Subtle reminders that the past continues to exist alongside the present. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns. Figures often appear at the same locations along the tree line. Whispers follow consistent pathways, and the sounds of footsteps or rustling coincide with sightings, suggesting that the farm is a living archive of memory and activity. Visitors leave Bloodwood Farm with a lasting impression of unease and fascination. The shadowy figures, drifting whispers, and sudden rustling leave an indelible mark on memory. Some return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity or a desire to witness the orchard's spectral activity firsthand. Others quietly retreat, unsettled by the persistent sensation of being watched and the presence of unseen forces that guide and observe each step. Ghostlight Orchard, nestled in the rolling hills near Asheville, is a place where the ordinary boundaries of time and reality seem to dissolve beneath the weight of lingering presence. Once a thriving orchard celebrated for its bountiful harvests and sun-drenched autumns, the land now lies abandoned, overgrown with tangled branches and wild underbrush, the wooden fences splintered and the barns slowly succumbing to decay. Visitors report seeing flickering lights among the trees, faint glows that appear and vanish without explanation. Shadows move with an unsettling purpose, as if carrying out the routines of a lifelong past. Approaching the orchard, one is immediately struck by the weight of silence. Even on bright, cloudless days, a thin mist seems to cling to the rows of apple trees, softening the outlines of the barns and fences. The further one walks into the orchard, the more palpable the sense of observation becomes. Visitors frequently report catching glimpses of movement at the edge of their vision, shadows shifting between the trunks, figures moving deliberately yet always just out of reach. Some describe these shapes as vaguely human, appearing to wear the faded work clothes of orchard laborers, while others are more distorted, flickering as though caught between two worlds. When approached, the shadows vanish completely, leaving only the chill of air disturbed and a faint, lingering scent of apples and earth. The trees of Ghostlight Orchard form narrow corridors that seem to guide movement through the land. Visitors have reported seeing figures moving along these corridors, bending as though tending to invisible fruit or adjusting unseen branches. Multiple shadows sometimes appear to work in tandem, pacing in patterns that suggest deliberate, purposeful action rather than random movement. Even in still air, Leaves rustle and branches creak, as if unseen hands are performing tasks long forgotten. The flickering lights are among the most striking and unnerving features of Ghostlight Orchard. These ephemeral glows often appear suspended among the tree branches, sometimes moving slowly along rows or appearing near the ground, as if tracing invisible paths. Some witnesses report multiple lights moving in coordination, almost as if performing a silent labor, appearing and disappearing in succession along the orchard's winding paths. The effect is disorienting, giving the sense that the orchard itself is alive with purposeful energy, replaying routines from a long-forgotten past. Shadows in the orchard are equally compelling. They glide deliberately across the ground, moving among the trunks and branches with apparent intent. Some seem to mimic the movements of human laborers picking, bending, or pacing, while others move along paths that do not correspond to any visitor's steps. Guests often feel as though they are being guided, or perhaps observed, by these forms, which vanish the moment direct attention is focused upon them. The combination of shadow, flickering light, and shifting mist creates a disorienting environment in which the ordinary rules of perception seem suspended. Visitors cannot be certain where a shadow begins and ends, or whether a light is a reflection, an apparition, or something entirely otherworldly. Local legend holds that Ghostlight Orchard is haunted by the souls of workers and families who once cared for the land. The figures observed in the trees are often interpreted as echoes of past caretakers, endlessly performing tasks that were never completed. The orchard itself is seen as a repository of memory, preserving gestures, routines, and movements long abandoned. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns. Certain rows of trees consistently host spectral activity. Shadows often follow the same invisible paths, and lights flicker in coordinated patterns that suggest intent rather than randomness. Visitors leave Ghostlight Orchard with a lingering sense of awe and unease. Many recall the fleeting figures moving silently among the branches, the strange lights hovering just beyond reach, and the sensation of being quietly observed by unseen eyes. Some return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity and the desire to witness the orchard's spectral routines firsthand. Others retreat quietly, unsettled by the persistent feeling of being guided or watched. Ghostlight Orchard leaves an indelible impression, a place where memory lingers in the air, perception is challenged, and the past continues to move among the twisted trees and mist-laden paths. At Ghostlight Orchard, flickering lights drift among gnarled branches, shadows glide with intent across overgrown rows, and the land itself seems to carry memory in every rustle and creak. The orchard, abandoned yet alive with lingering presences, creates an environment where perception is tested, memory persists, and unseen watchers move silently among the trees. Shadows dart deliberately, lights flicker mysteriously, and every visitor departs with a profound sense of mystery, unease, and the haunting presence that defines Ghostlight Orchard. Silent Harvest Farm, tucked away on the outskirts of Morganton, is a place where the ordinary rules of life seem suspended, replaced by an atmosphere dense with mystery and lingering memory. Once a thriving farm, celebrated for its abundant crops and vibrant orchards, it now stands largely abandoned. The fields overgrown, fences splintered, and barns crumbling under years of neglect. Visitors to Silent Harvest Farm report cold gusts that sweep through the land without warning, rustling leaves and branches even when the air is still. Sudden movements are seen among the tree shadows, darting and twisting in ways that defy logic. Occasionally, figures of children appear, fleeting and playful, glimpsed between trunks or skipping along overgrown paths, only to vanish instantly the moment they are noticed. The farm exists in a space suspended between the living and the remembered, where the echoes of the past seem as tangible as the present. Approaching Silent Harvest Farm, the first impression is one of oppressive stillness. Even during bright daylight, a muted haze seems to cling to the fields and orchards, softening the outlines of the barns and silhouetting the gnarled trees against the sky. As visitors walk among the rows of overgrown crops or the crooked paths winding through old orchards, they often sense unseen eyes watching, shadows moving just beyond the edges of perception. These shadows are not random. They appear purposeful, as though performing tasks left unfinished long ago. Figures of children are glimpsed briefly at the edge of vision, sometimes chasing invisible balls, skipping along the furrows, or hiding behind trees, only to disappear when directly observed. Their laughter is faint, ethereal, and seems to carry on the wind, leaving visitors with a sense of being simultaneously drawn in and kept at a distance. The orchards and fields themselves create corridors of unease. Their twisted branches and tall grasses form natural pathways that wind and bend unpredictably. Shadows move among these natural corridors, gliding silently between trees or along the edges of old fences. Some forms mimic human gestures, reaching, bending, pacing, while others are more abstract, flickering and stretching as if caught between dimensions. The land itself seems alive with memory, preserving gestures, routines, and movements long abandoned by those who once lived and worked there. Cold gusts of wind are a hallmark of Silent Harvest Farm. They rise suddenly, sweeping across the fields, brushing over shoulders, and rattling tree branches, often coinciding with the appearance of shadows or the brief glimpse of children playing. Visitors have described these gusts as chilling, unnervingly precise, and sometimes accompanied by the faintest of whispers, names, fragments of conversations, or laughter carried just above the edge of hearing. The gusts move unpredictably, swirling around visitors in ways that make every step uncertain. They leave a lingering sensation, a brush of something unseen against the skin, reinforcing the impression that the farm itself is aware, observing, and responding to intrusions into its forgotten spaces. The figures of children are among the most unsettling and compelling aspects of the farm's haunting. Their movements are fleeting, playful, and yet disturbingly deliberate. Guests report seeing small shapes darting between trees, hopping over old fences, or peering from behind orchards, only to vanish when approached. Sometimes, the laughter of these children carries across the fields, soft but distinct, echoing as if from a place out of time. Observers often feel a simultaneous pull of curiosity and caution, drawn to the activity, yet wary of getting too close. The figures leave no footprints, no traces beyond the impression they make on perception, reinforcing the orchard's reputation as a liminal space where the living and the spectral intersect. Visitors navigating the farm often find themselves disoriented by the layout. Some guests report walking along a row of orchards, only to find themselves back at a gate they passed moments before, with no memory of how they returned. Others note that the mist and light shift in response to movement, obscuring certain figures while revealing fleeting silhouettes elsewhere. Local lore suggests that the haunting at Silent Harvest Farm stems from decades of human activity, tragedy, and memory. Families and children who once worked and played there left behind traces of their lives, preserved in the land itself. The children seen among the trees are believed to be echoes of those who grew up on the farm, their routines and play imprinted in the orchard's memory. The shadows and gusts of wind are considered the residual energy of caretakers, responding to human presence in subtle, persistent ways. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns. Certain orchards or rows of crops consistently host activity. Shadows appear to follow invisible paths, and the sounds of laughter or whispers coincide with the movement of figures, suggesting a deliberate, ongoing presence. Visitors leave Silent Harvest Farm with a lingering sense of unease and wonder. The fleeting figures of children, the unpredictable gusts of cold air, and the purposeful shadows create a memory that is difficult to shake. Some are drawn back repeatedly, compelled by curiosity or the desire to witness the farm's haunting firsthand. Others quietly retreat, unsettled by the sensation of unseen eyes tracking their every movement. Silent Harvest Farm is a place where memory lingers in the land. Perception is challenged, and the line between the living and the spectral becomes indistinct. At Silent Harvest Farm, cold gusts sweep unpredictably through overgrown orchards. Shadows glide with purpose along twisted paths, and figures of children appear and vanish like whispers of the past. The farm, abandoned yet alive, with lingering presences, creates a landscape where perception is tested, memory persists, and unseen watchers move silently among trees and fields. Shadows dart with intent, laughter floats on the wind, and every visitor departs with a profound sense of unease, fascination, and the haunting presence that defines Silent Harvest Farm. Twilight Apple Farm, perched on the outskirts of Hendersonville, is a place where the boundary between the living and the unseen seems impossibly thin. Once known for its lush rows of apple trees and vibrant harvest festivals, the farm now stands in quiet abandonment. The orchards are overgrown, the wooden fences sag under the weight of years, and the barns creak as if protesting against neglect. Visitors to Twilight Apple Farm often report an unsettling presence, shadows gliding silently along the orchard paths, moving with purpose but disappearing the moment they are directly observed. Strange sounds follow closely behind, faint laughter echoing through the trees, soft weeping drifting across the fields, and occasional whispers that seem to carry through the very air itself. The farm exists not just as a physical place, but as a lingering memory of the past, alive with echoes of lives long gone. Approaching the farm, visitors are immediately struck by the heavy stillness that blankets the orchards. Even in the warm light of late afternoon, the air carries a chill, a subtle tension that seems to make the skin crawl. The pathways, once neatly maintained, are now hidden beneath long grass and fallen leaves. Shadows seem to stretch unnaturally between tree trunks, moving independently of the shifting sunlight. Guests frequently catch glimpses of forms at the edge of their vision, dark silhouettes pacing the paths, sometimes halting to peer from behind trees, other times moving as though performing tasks long forgotten. When approached, these figures vanish without a trace, leaving only a lingering sense of presence and the faintest rustle of disturbed foliage. The orchard itself seems to guide visitors through its rows, twisting and turning in ways that feel deliberate. Branches, thick with tangled growth, form corridors that obscure the distance and create a sense of enclosure. Shadows move along these corridors with apparent intent, gliding along pathways that seem familiar to them, but alien to newcomers. Some appear to mimic human gestures, bending, reaching, pacing, or gesturing to invisible companions. Others are more abstract, flickering and stretching, like smoke caught in the twilight. Even in moments of complete silence, leaves rustle and branches sway as if the orchard itself is alive, reacting to every footstep and every movement, creating the impression that visitors are never truly alone. The sounds of laughter and weeping are among the most haunting elements of Twilight Apple Farm. Laughter, light and fleeting, carries across the fields as though children were playing among the trees, yet no one is visible. Weeping follows closely, low and sorrowful, echoing through the gaps in the orchards and drifting across the land like a mournful wind. Sometimes these sounds intermingle, creating an eerie symphony of joy and sorrow, laughter followed by cries, joy abruptly turning to lamentation. The voices are faint, often impossible to locate precisely, giving the impression that they move with the shadows, appearing wherever attention falters. Some visitors report hearing their own names whispered amid the sounds, adding an intimate and unsettling quality to the experience. Shadows along the orchard paths are persistent and deliberate. Guests have reported seeing multiple forms gliding side by side, moving as though performing some hidden ritual. The shadows sometimes pause at the edge of rows, hover near apple-laden branches, or vanish into the undergrowth, only to reappear moments later along another path. Their movements do not correspond to the natural patterns of wind or light, and they leave no footprints or marks, as if the orchard itself bends reality to accommodate their presence. Those who linger too long describe the sensation of being subtly guided or herded, the shadows moving in synchrony with their steps, creating a tension that is both exhilarating and deeply unnerving. Local lore suggests that Twilight Apple Farm is haunted by the spirits of children and workers who once lived and toiled there. The shadows are believed to be echoes of these past inhabitants, endlessly retracing steps, playing, working, or observing intruders with quiet attention. The laughter and weeping are thought to be the remnants of emotions once lived, fully moments of joy, sorrow, and fear preserved in the orchard's memory. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns. Certain paths consistently host shadow activity. Laughter follows predictable routes across the fields, and figures often appear near familiar landmarks, like old wells, barns, or dens. Clusters of apple trees, suggesting that the farm retains a map of past lives. Visitors navigating Twilight Apple Farm often feel disoriented. Paths seem to shift subtly. Trees appear in unexpected locations, and familiar sights transform between visits. Shadows and sounds play with perception, making it difficult to distinguish reality from memory or imagination. Guests leave Twilight Apple Farm with an enduring sense of awe and unease. The fleeting figures, the whispers of laughter and sorrow, and the purposeful shadows leave a mark that is difficult to shake. Some are drawn back repeatedly, compelled to witness the orchard's haunting firsthand. Others retreat quietly, unsettled by the persistent sensation of being watched, guided, or even tested by unseen presences. Twilight Apple Farm is more than a haunted location. It is a living memory, a place where perception, time, and presence overlap, where the past continues to move through the trees and along the orchard paths. At Twilight Apple Farm, shadows glide along overgrown paths. Laughter and weeping echo across the fields, and the air is heavy with memory. The orchard, abandoned yet alive with lingering presences, creates an environment where perception is challenged. Memory persists, and unseen watchers move silently among the trees. Shadows move with intent. Laughter floats on the breeze, and every visitor departs with a profound sense of unease, fascination, and the haunting presence that defines Twilight Apple Farm. Redleaf Orchard, nestled in the rolling hills of Boone, is a place where the ordinary rhythms of life give way to an unsettling, almost timeless presence. Once a thriving orchard renowned for its crimson-tinged apples and bountiful harvests, the land now stands abandoned. Its rows of trees overgrown and wild, the barns and sheds slowly succumbing to decay. Locals speak of Redleaf Orchard in hushed tones, warning that those who wander its paths after dark may encounter figures moving silently among the trees, performing actions that seem purposeful yet entirely unseen. Visitors often report the chilling sensation of being watched, feeling a presence close behind them, even when no one is visible. The orchard has become a landscape suspended between the living and the spectral, where shadows and whispers mingle with the scent of earth and fallen leaves, creating a haunting atmosphere that leaves a lasting impression on anyone who dares to enter. Approaching Redleaf Orchard at twilight, the first impression is one of eerie stillness. Even on calm evenings, a subtle chill drifts through the rows of apple trees, brushing against shoulders and rustling leaves as though unseen hands pass through the branches. The paths, once neatly maintained, are now tangled with grass and fallen foliage, giving the sense that the orchard itself has grown wild with time. Visitors often notice shadows moving between the trees at the edge of their vision, bending and gliding in ways that suggest deliberate action. Some shapes appear humanoid, performing motions reminiscent of orchard workbending, picking, or reaching toward the fruit. Others are more abstract, flickering and stretching unnaturally, their movements leaving an impression of purpose without revealing the form behind it. The actions of these figures are silent yet strikingly precise. Guests have described seeing shapes pause among the trees, moving in patterns that hint at repetition, as if caught in a loop of daily tasks from long ago. Some witnesses feel drawn toward particular trees or sections of the orchard, guided by the movement of shadows that appear to anticipate their steps. When approached directly, the figures vanish, leaving only the rustle of disturbed leaves and a sudden drop in temperature. A defining feature of Redleaf Orchard is the persistent sensation of presence. Visitors frequently feel that someone or something is close behind them, moving in tandem yet remaining unseen. Some have described the feeling as protective, while others experience it as deeply unsettling. The invisible observer shifting closer whenever curiosity compels the visitor to linger. This duality adds to the orchard's mystique, as it seems to straddle the line between invitation and warning, offering glimpses of the past while reminding those present that the land is not fully their own. The The orchard's natural features amplify its haunting qualities. Fallen leaves and undergrowth muffle footsteps, giving the impression that the shadows glide rather than walk. Occasionally, gusts of cold wind sweep through the trees, carrying faint rustles and whispers, as though the orchard itself is whispering stories from generations past. These sounds are intermittent, unpredictable, and disorienting, leaving visitors unsure whether they are hearing echoes of history, the movement of the wind, or the whispers of unseen figures performing their nightly rituals. Local legends suggest that Redleaf Orchard is haunted by the spirits of past orchard workers and children who grew up on the land. Lives intertwined with the rhythms of planting, harvesting, and tending to the trees. The figures seen at night are believed to be echoes of these past lives, performing tasks they once carried out daily, endlessly replaying routines imprinted into the orchard's memory. The persistent sensation of presence, the rustling shadows, and the subtle guidance of visitors are interpreted as the orchard's way of preserving these echoes, allowing the past to coexist with the present. Paranormal investigators note recurring patterns. Certain rows consistently host shadow activity. Trees in specific locations seem to attract figures, and the invisible presence often aligns with pathways or landmarks that correspond to old routines. Visitors leave Redleaf Orchard with a deep, lingering sense of unease and fascination. The silent figures, the sensation of unseen watchers, and the whispering wind creates an experience that is both disorienting and mesmerizing. Some return repeatedly, drawn by curiosity and the desire to witness the orchard's nightly rituals firsthand. Others retreat quickly, unsettled by the awareness of being observed by presences that may not belong to the physical world. Redleaf Orchard is more than a haunted landscape. It is a living memory, a place where shadows move with intent, presence lingers in the air, and the past continues to enact itself among the rows of crimson apple trees. At Redleaf Orchard, silent figures glide through overgrown rows. Unseen watchers follow every step, and the wind carries whispers of lives long past. Shadows move with purpose. Presence is felt though invisible, and every visitor departs with a profound sense of unease, fascination, and the haunting memory that defines the orchard, a place where time, life, and spectral echoes intertwine beneath the moonlit canopy. Hollow Tree Farm, situated on the outskirts of Hickory, is a place where time feels suspended and the ordinary rhythms of life are overshadowed by something far older and more elusive. Once a flourishing farm known for its sprawling orchards and rich harvests, it now stands largely abandoned, the trees gnarled with age and the land overgrown with untamed grasses. Visitors who wander the farm after dusk often report fleeting figures moving silently among the rows of apple and peach trees, their forms barely discernible in the fading light. These figures vanish the moment they are approached, leaving only the rustle of leaves or a lingering shadow as proof of their presence. Hollow Tree Farm is a place alive with memory and the unseen, where whispers echo softly through the air, calling names long forgotten, and cold spots form unexpectedly near the oldest and largest trees, chilling the air in ways that defy explanation. Approaching Hollow Tree Farm, one is immediately struck by its heavy stillness. Even on clear, calm evenings, the air feels dense and charged, carrying with it the faint scent of earth, decaying leaves, and distant blossoms. Guests frequently notice movement at the periphery of their vision, shapes gliding between trees, pausing near low-hanging branches, and sometimes disappearing entirely into the shadows. Some figures resemble humans, performing actions as if engaged in farm work or tending the trees, while others are more abstract, stretching and flickering like smoke caught in the dim light. These appearances are fleeting, yet they leave an undeniable impression, a sense of being observed and of a presence lingering just beyond comprehension. The farm's oldest trees are focal points of its mysterious activity. Visitors often report sudden cold spots forming near their massive trunks, the temperature dropping noticeably as they approach. These cold zones are accompanied by soft whispers, voices that murmur names or speak in fragmented phrases. The whispers are delicate and almost indistinguishable, yet they seem directed, as if acknowledging the presence of those who entered the orchard. Many describe a tingling sensation along the skin, a brush of air that feels like a hand passing lightly over the shoulder, reinforcing the feeling that the land itself is aware of their presence. Some guests report hearing their own names called in this way, drawing them closer to the oldest trees, only for the figures to vanish before they can be seen clearly. The movements of the figures are deliberate and precise. Guests often notice them gliding along pathways between trees or crouching briefly as if inspecting fallen fruit. Others appear to drift silently across open areas, their forms blending seamlessly with shadows. Even when no wind stirs the branches, leaves rustle as though brushed by unseen hands. The farm seems to preserve echoes of the past, replaying moments of daily life and ritual endlessly. Shadowy figures repeat gestures once performed by caretakers, orchard workers, or children playing among the trees, leaving visitors with the impression that the land itself holds memory in its soil and wood. Hollow Tree Farm is particularly disorienting to visitors. Paths wind unpredictably between rows of trees. Familiar landmarks seem to shift with each visit, and shadows move in ways that defy natural expectation. Even the light of the moon casts distorted patterns along the orchard floor, creating the illusion that figures move independently of the natural environment. Cold gusts drift through the land without warning, carrying whispers that echo from unseen corners, enhancing the feeling of being watched. The farm seems to subtly guide those who walk its paths, bending perception and memory so that each step feels both familiar and alien. Local legend suggests that the haunting of Hollow Tree Farm originates from generations of families who lived and worked the land, their lives imprinted in the very fabric of the orchard. Children who played under the branches, laborers who tended the crops, and caretakers who walked the rows of trees are believed to linger as echoes of their former selves. The figures, the whispers, and the sudden cold spots are thought to be manifestations of these lingering presences, performing the routines of their lives over and over, unseen by most, but keenly aware of anyone who enters the orchard. Paranormal investigators have noted that certain trees, particularly the oldest, consistently host activity, and that figures often appear in patterns that suggest memory rather than randomness. Visitors leave Hollow Tree Farm with a lasting sense of unease and fascination. The fleeting figures, cold spots, and whispered names create an environment where perception is challenged and memory persists. Some are drawn back repeatedly, compelled to witness the farm's mysterious nightly rituals, while others retreat quickly, unsettled by the weight of unseen eyes and the subtle presence that seems to follow them along the orchard paths. Hollow Tree Farm endures as a place where the past and present coexist, where shadows move with intent, and where the land itself whispers the stories of those who once walked among its trees. At Hollow Tree Farm, figures glide silently through overgrown orchards. Cold spots form near ancient trees, and whispers drift on the night air. Shadows move with purpose, unseen presences linger, and visitors depart with the haunting awareness of a land alive with memory. A place where the ordinary rules of time, space, and perception no longer fully apply. Ravenwood Orchard, located just outside Statesville, is a place where the ordinary rhythms of rural life seem suspended beneath a veil of unease. Once celebrated for its lush apple trees and crisp autumn harvests, the orchard now stands largely abandoned. Its rows overgrown and tangled, the wooden fences weathered and sagging. Locals speak of the orchard in cautious tones, warning that those who venture among the trees after dusk may witness shadowy shapes moving with a quiet purpose, figures that vanish when approached, leaving only rustling leaves and a lingering chill. Visitors frequently report a sense of being watched, a subtle tug at the edge of perception, as if unseen hands manipulate the environment, disturbing the fallen fruit along the paths or shifting branches slightly as they pass. Ravenwood Orchard has become a liminal space, caught between memory and presence, where shadows hold the stories of the past and the air is heavy with the remnants of unseen activity. Upon entering the orchard, guests immediately notice the thickening silence. Even on evenings without wind, the trees seem to sway, the branches brushing together with a sound like whispered conversation. The pathways, once neatly maintained, are now hidden beneath a tangle of grass and leaves, creating narrow corridors of shadow between the apple rows. Shadowy shapes are often seen gliding along these paths, moving with a deliberate rhythm, pausing as if inspecting fallen fruit, or peering through the twisted branches. Some figures appear humanoid, their forms hunched or bending as though performing routine tasks, while others are more amorphous, stretching and shifting in ways that defy natural observation. Whenever approached directly, the shapes vanish, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves or the slight rolling of apples along the ground. The orchard seems aware of its visitors, subtly guiding attention and creating the impression of a presence just beyond the visible. The disturbances of the orchard's natural environment are among the most unsettling. Fallen apples, once motionless on the ground, are sometimes nudged or rolled without any discernible cause, as though invisible hands pass through the rows. Guests report feeling sudden cold drafts, often centered around the oldest and largest trees, as if the land itself exhales a breath that chills the skin. These occurrences are accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps on dried leaves, yet no one is there. Shadows move independently of the wind or the light, darting between trunks and vanishing when approached. Even in moments of complete stillness, there is a sense of quiet observation, a subtle awareness that each movement is noted by unseen entities. The orchard itself alive with memory and intent. Local legend tells of families who once lived and worked on the land, tending the apple trees, harvesting fruit, and raising children among the rows. Generations of labor, play, and ordinary life have left an imprint on the soil and trees. A residual energy that manifests as shadowy figures and unseen manipulation of the environment. Visitors often describe the shadows as repeating the gestures of these past inhabitants, bending to gather fruit, pacing between trees, or pausing to look toward invisible companions. The gentle disturbances of the fallen apples and shifting branches are interpreted as remnants of these routines, replayed endlessly as echoes of lives once lived fully within the orchard. Whispers and other faint sounds accompany the visual phenomena. Guests often report hearing fragments of conversation or soft sighs drifting from between the trees and carrying through the orchard in ways that seem impossible. These whispers are rarely clear, instead forming broken phrases, murmured names, or distant laughter that rises and fades unpredictably. Sometimes the sounds seem to follow visitors, drifting alongside them as they walk the paths, creating the sense of being accompanied by invisible observers. The combination of moving shadows, disturbed fruit, and murmured voices creates a haunting experience in which perception itself feels altered, blurring the line between reality and memory. The orchard appears to subtly guide those who wander among its rows, revealing areas dense with activity while leaving others completely silent. Patterns emerge. Shadowy figures often appear near particularly gnarled or ancient trees. Unseen hands manipulate apples in predictable ways, and whispers tend to echo from the same general areas, regardless of the visitor's path. Some who linger too long report a sensation of being gently followed, a weight at the shoulder or back that vanishes when they turn, reinforcing the sense that the orchard is alive and aware. Leaving Ravenwood Orchard, visitors carry with them a sense of both unease and fascination. The fleeting shapes, the whispered voices, and the subtle manipulations of the orchard create an experience that lingers long after the trees fade from view. Some are drawn back repeatedly, compelled to witness the silent rituals of the shadows firsthand, while others retreat quickly, unsettled by the invisible presence and the knowledge that the orchard watches and moves even when unobserved. Ravenwood Orchard is more than a haunted location. It is a living memory, a place where shadow and wind, sound and movement merge to preserve the echoes of the past, allowing them to continue their silent existence among the apple trees. At Ravenwood Orchard, shadowy shapes glide between overgrown rows. Unseen hands disturb the fallen fruit, and whispers drift through the air. Visitors feel watched and guided, chilled and unsettled, yet drawn inexorably into the orchard's timeless spectral presence, a place where the echoes of life persist endlessly beneath the moonlit canopy, haunting all who enter. Moonlit Orchard, located just outside the quiet outskirts of Wilkesboro, is a place where the natural rhythms of the countryside seem to dissolve into something far more enigmatic. Once a flourishing orchard known for its rich harvests of apples and pears, the land now stands largely abandoned, the rows of trees sprawling and tangled, their branches heavy with age. Those who wander the orchard after dusk report strange occurrences that defy explanation. Shadowy figures glide silently among the trees, moving with a deliberate grace as though performing rituals long forgotten. Flickering lights appear intermittently, illuminating sections of the orchard without any discernible source, casting long, distorted shadows across the ground and creating an atmosphere thick with mystery and unease. Visitors often describe a sensation of being watched, though no one is ever seen, and a persistent feeling that the orchard itself is alive, observing and guiding the movements of all who enter. The dense branches of the trees twist and intertwine, forming natural corridors that guide both shadow and visitor alike. Guests report glimpsing figures at the edge of their vision, shapes that glide effortlessly between trunks and along the overgrown pathways. Some figures appear humanoid, bending or reaching as if tending to the trees, while others are more abstract, stretching and flickering like smoke caught in the moonlight. Whenever approached directly, these figures vanish, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the faint echo of movement as evidence that they were ever present. The orchard seems to respond to the presence of visitors, its shadows and flickering lights subtly guiding attention and creating a profound sense of being accompanied by something unseen. The flickering lights are among the most unnerving features of Moonlit Orchard. Appearing without warning, they illuminate sections of the trees and ground, glowing briefly and then fading, leaving the orchard in partial darkness. No wires, lanterns, or electrical sources are ever found, yet the lights are bright enough to reveal the ghostly shapes of gliding figures and the occasional shift in leaves or fallen fruit. Guests often describe the lights as both inviting and alarming, highlighting paths that seem both familiar and impossible, and revealing shadowy forms that vanish the moment one attempts to approach. The source remains a mystery, leaving visitors to speculate whether it is the orchard itself manifesting memory, or whether the lights are created by forces beyond ordinary understanding. The movements of the figures are deliberate and precise. Visitors often observe them gliding silently along paths between trees, pausing occasionally to touch a branch or to linger near an old wooden fence. Some appear to replay routines once performed by orchard workers, checking fruit, bending to pick up fallen apples, or tracing paths through the rows. Others move with no discernible purpose, drifting aimlessly but with an undeniable awareness of those nearby. Even when the wind is still, leaves rustle as though brushed by unseen hands, enhancing the sense that the orchard is alive and aware, a repository of memory and presence that transcends the ordinary. The orchard's natural features amplify its haunting qualities. Twisted branches create shadows that stretch unnaturally across the ground, forming shapes that seem to move independently of the figures themselves. Fallen leaves and fruit shift occasionally without apparent cause, as if nudged by invisible hands. The flickering lights cast elongated, distorted forms that seem to interact with the shadows, producing an effect that blurs the line between reality and perception. Visitors frequently feel a subtle pressure along their shoulders or back, a sensation that they are being quietly observed or guided, reinforcing the sense that the orchard is not simply a place, but a presence in itself. Local legend holds that Moonlit Orchard is haunted by the spirits of past orchard workers and families who once lived and labored among the trees. Generations of caretakers, children playing beneath the branches, and harvesters moving through the rows are said to linger as echoes of their former lives. The shadowy figures are believed to be these echoes, endlessly performing tasks they once carried out during the day, now replayed beneath the cover of night. The flickering lights may be the orchard's way of preserving memory, highlighting spaces once filled with life and motion. Paranormal investigators have noted consistent patterns. Certain rows of trees consistently host shadow activity, and the lights tend to illuminate specific paths, creating a haunting choreography between form, movement, and illumination. Visitors leave Moonlit Orchard with a mixture of fascination and unease. The silent figures, the flickering lights, and the inexplicable movement of leaves and fruit create an experience that lingers long after the orchard disappears from view. Some are drawn back repeatedly, compelled to witness the nightly rituals of the shadows and lights, while others retreat quickly, unsettled by the sensation of being watched by unseen presences. Moonlit Orchard endures as more than a simple haunted location. It is a living memory, a place where shadows move with intent. Lights appear without source, and the past continues to echo in every branch and leaf. At Moonlit Orchard, figures glide silently among ancient trees. Flickering lights illuminate unseen paths, and unseen hands stir the fallen fruit. Visitors feel the weight of invisible eyes and the pull of spectral guidance, leaving with a profound awareness that the orchard is alive with memory, movement, and presence. It is a place where the ordinary rules of perception dissolve beneath the moonlit canopy, and the echoes of the past continue to glide, unseen but deeply felt, through the rows of gnarled trees. Gloomfield Farm, nestled just outside Ashbel, is a place where the air feels heavier as soon as one steps onto its overgrown orchard paths. Those who visit after dusk report sensations that are impossible to ignore, faint footsteps echoing behind them, shadows flickering at the edge of vision, and a persistent feeling of being watched. Gloomfield Farm is a place where reality and memory intertwine, where shadows perform invisible rituals, and where the ordinary rules of perception seem to dissolve in the dim light of evening. Guests frequently hear the crunch of footsteps on dry leaves or the soft thud of apples rolling underfoot, though no one else is visible. These sounds often follow them along the narrow corridors formed by rows of ancient apple trees, appearing to mimic their movements, echoing their pace, or sometimes lagging just slightly behind. Shadowy shapes are commonly glimpsed at the periphery of sight, human-like silhouettes standing motionless among the branches or gliding silently across the paths. When approached directly, the figures vanish, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves and an inexplicable chill in the air, reinforcing the eerie sense that the farm itself is observing the visitors. The edges of the orchard are particularly unsettling. In the spaces where the trees are densest, shadows seem to stretch and move independently, forming shapes that twist and contort as if aware of those nearby. Guests report seeing forms that linger behind the trunks, observing silently, and then dart away into darkness when noticed. Even without visible figures, the farm exerts a subtle influence. Apples occasionally roll or shift as though nudged by invisible hands. The effect is disorienting, leaving visitors unsure of whether they are hearing the echoes of their own movements or those of unseen presences walking just behind them. Many guests describe seeing them glide between trees in patterns that resemble work or ritual. Some figures appear to mimic the actions of orchard caretakers from decades past, inspecting branches, bending to lift fallen apples, or pacing along paths as if performing nightly rounds. Others move seemingly without purpose, drifting slowly through the rows, yet always maintaining awareness of anyone present. Even when the orchard is silent, the faint whisper of movement, leaves brushing, fruit rolling, branches snapping, creates the impression of a land alive with memory, replaying moments of daily life in spectral form. Sometimes names are called, other times only short, unfinished sentences echo through the orchard, rising and fading unpredictably. The whispers seem to come from every direction at once, yet cannot be traced to any particular source, adding to the sensation of being followed or observed by unseen entities. The combination of faint footsteps, shadowy figures, and distant murmurs gives the impression that Gloomfield Farm preserves the echoes of its former inhabitants. The farm's history contributes to its haunting reputation. Generations of families once lived and worked the land, raising children among the trees, harvesting the fruit, and tending the orchards through the changing seasons. Local legend holds that the spirits of these past residents linger, replaying their routines endlessly, invisible to most, but keenly aware of intruders. The shadows and whispered footsteps are said to be manifestations of these lingering presences, echoes of lives that continue their routines despite the passage of time. Guests leaving Gloomfield Farm rarely forget the experience. The footsteps that follow, the shadows that vanish, and the whispered names create a lingering sense of unease and fascination. Some are compelled to return repeatedly, drawn to the orchard to witness the silent rituals of the past. Others leave quickly, unsettled by the persistent sensation of being watched and guided, haunted by the memory of the invisible presence that seems to inhabit the land. The orchard endures as a place where the ordinary intersects with the extraordinary, where shadows glide with intent, and where the echoes of past life remain entwined with the present. At Gloomfield Farm, shadows appear at the edges of vision. Ghostly footsteps trace the paths alongside visitors, and whispers drift through the orchard air. The trees sway in silence, apples roll without cause, and unseen presences watch and move among the branches. Visitors depart with the heavy impression of a land alive with memory and intent, a place where the ordinary rules of perception fade, leaving only the haunting awareness of what lingers beneath the moonlit canopy. Gloomfield Farm is not simply an orchard. It is a living chronicle of presence and shadow, an enduring testament to the restless echoes of lives once lived among the trees. Fogville Orchard, tucked deep in the rolling hills of Boone, is a place where the ordinary rhythms of a rural orchard dissolve into an unsettling realm of shadow and silence. Once a flourishing orchard celebrated for its crisp apples and pear harvests, Fogville now lies mostly abandoned, the trees tangled and sprawling, their branches heavy with time and neglect. Those who venture among the rows after dusk report a host of inexplicable occurrences. Figures are glimpsed gliding silently between the trees, often carrying invisible baskets, as if tending to a harvest that no one can see. Cold drafts sweep through the orchard with sudden intensity, carrying faint whispers from mouths that cannot be located, leaving visitors with a sense of being watched and guided by invisible presences. The orchard is a place where memory and shadow intertwine, a living archive of past labor, play, and lingering presence. Upon entering Fogville Orchard, the first sensation is a profound stillness. The trees rise like silent sentinels, their twisted limbs forming natural corridors through which shadows move. Guests often hear faint footsteps on the leaf-strewn paths, echoing softly behind them, though no one else is present. At the edge of vision, fleeting figures appear, human-like shapes bending, reaching, or gliding along the rows, as if engaged in tasks from long ago. Names are sometimes called, often broken or repeated as if caught in an endless loop. Short phrases, half-formed sentences, and faint murmurs weave through the branches, drifting from tree to tree with no clear origin. Visitors frequently feel these voices brushing against their consciousness, accompanying them along the paths, and intensifying the sense of being both observed and guided. The orchard seems to exist in a state of perpetual rehearsal, replaying the routines and echoes of those who once lived and labored among the trees. History anchors Fogville orchards haunting. For generations, families worked the land, tending apple and pear trees, harvesting fruit, and raising children amid the orchards. These lives, lived in close rhythm with the land, have left an enduring impression on the orchard itself. Local legend holds that the spirits of these workers and families linger, repeating their routines in ghostly form, guiding and observing anyone who ventures too far into the rows. Visitors often describe the sensation of being drawn toward certain clusters of trees or particular paths, subtly led by unseen forces. The invisible baskets, the cold drafts, and the whispered voices are manifestations of the orchard's memory. Tangible, yet imperceptible, an echo of the past made present in ways that defy rational explanation. Those who spend time in Fogville Orchard often leave with a lingering unease, a mix of fascination and disorientation. The gliding figures, invisible baskets, whispered phrases, and shifting shadows create an experience that endures long after the orchard disappears from view. Some are compelled to return night after night, drawn by the urge to witness the silent harvest of the shadows. Others retreat quickly, unsettled by the sense of being watched and the knowledge that unseen forces continue their presence among the trees. The orchard becomes more than a physical space. It's a living record of memory and movement, a place where the echoes of past life remain intertwined with the present. Fogville Orchard is a place of quiet, spectral activity. Figures glide along the rows, carrying baskets that exist only in shadow, their movements deliberate and rhythmic. Cold drafts sweep through the orchard, carrying whispers from unseen mouths, brushing against the skin and tickling the senses. Fallen apples sometimes shift inexplicably. Branches move in subtle ways, and every step along the leaf-strewn paths is accompanied by the impression of invisible observation. Visitors depart with the heavy awareness of being in a space where the ordinary rules of perception are suspended, leaving only the haunting presence of memory, shadow, and unseen labor. At Fogville Orchard, shadows carry the weight of generations. Figures move with unseen purpose, and whispers echo endlessly through the night air. Those who enter step into a realm where past and present converge, where invisible baskets are filled nightly, and where the echoes of life continue to glide, unseen yet profoundly felt, beneath the moonlit canopy. Black Branch Orchard, tucked away in the rolling hills of Henderson County, is a place where the ordinary rules of nature seem to dissolve. Once a thriving orchard, known for its abundant apples and rich harvests, the land has since fallen into disuse, leaving rows of gnarled trees tangled with undergrowth and a landscape where shadows twist in ways that defy logic. Visitors who wander the orchard after dusk report experiences that cannot be easily explained. Figures glimpsed at the periphery of vision, shadows stretching and folding unnaturally, and the sound of rustling leaves and subtle movements, even when the air is perfectly still. Black Branch Orchard is not simply an abandoned farm. It is a space where memory, shadow, and unseen presence intertwine, creating an atmosphere that feels alive, watchful, and profoundly unsettling. From the moment guests step onto the orchard paths, they notice the unusual stillness. There is a quiet that seems to amplify every footstep, every creak of an old branch, and yet even in moments of perfect silence, something shifts just beyond perception. Shadows move independently of the natural contours of the land, bending and folding as if guided by an invisible hand. Visitors describe shapes darting between trees or gliding across the paths, appearing to move with intent rather than being cast by moonlight or starlight. The effect is disorienting. A path that seemed empty moments ago may now hold a dark shape just at the edge of sight. only to vanish when approached directly, leaving behind the faint echo of movement in the underbrush. The phenomenon is not limited to visual anomalies. Guests consistently report sounds that seem impossible. Leaves rustle and branches sway even when no breeze stirs the air. Fallen fruit shifts as if nudged by unseen hands, and soft footsteps are heard along the rows of trees, keeping pace with visitors as though echoing their own movements. These subtle cues create a persistent sense of being observed. Even those who walk the paths deliberately, looking straight ahead, often feel eyes upon them, invisible but palpable, a presence that guides and reacts to their movements without ever revealing itself. The orchard's shadows are particularly unsettling in the deeper rows, where trees are densest and moonlight barely penetrates. Here, the darkness seems almost sentient. Shadows stretch and contort, bending around trunks, twisting along branches, and at times appearing to interact with one another. Visitors often feel that the shapes are moving with a rhythm or purpose, pacing in repeated patterns that suggest memory or intent. Some shadows resemble humanoid forms, bending as if tending to the orchard or reaching for the fruit, while others are abstract, fluid shapes that flicker and fold impossibly. The dissonance between expectation and perception leaves visitors uncertain whether what they see is real, spectral, or a trick of the mind. Yet the consistency of reports from multiple visitors suggests something beyond mere imagination. Whispers accompany the visual and auditory anomalies, though they are faint and fragmented. Names are sometimes called, or words broken into unfinished phrases, drifting along the paths and weaving through the trees. The sound is elusive, appearing from no fixed location and fading when one attempts to locate it. These murmurs enhance the sense of being followed or observed, as though the orchard itself retains the echoes of voices long past, replaying them to anyone who ventures too deeply into its rows. Guests often feel compelled to move along certain paths, guided subtly by sound and shadow, only to find themselves disoriented and retracing their steps without ever realizing it. The history of Black Branch Orchard adds to its mysterious reputation. For generations, families cultivated the land, harvesting apples and pears, tending the trees, and raising children beneath the branches. Local legend holds that the spirits of these past workers linger, replaying routines and tasks in ghostly form. Shadows are thought to be manifestations of these lingering presences, endlessly performing actions that were once routine, collecting fruit, inspecting trees, or pacing along the rows. Even when the orchard appears empty, the subtle movements, sounds, and shifting shadows suggest that the land itself remembers, acting as a living record of past lives. Visitors often leave Black Branch Orchard with a mixture of fascination and unease. The interplay of impossible shadows, unseen movements, and whispers creates an immersive experience that lingers long after leaving. Some are drawn back repeatedly, compelled to witness the nightly choreography of the orchard's unseen residents. Others retreat quickly, unsettled by the persistent sensation of being watched and the inexplicable movements of shadows that defy logic. The orchard exists as a threshold between ordinary perception and a more subtle, unseen reality, a place where the echoes of past life are tangible and pervasive. Black Branch Orchard is a place where shadows bend and fold independently, where the slightest rustle hints at presence, and where whispers drift through the air like fleeting ghosts. Figures appear at the edge of vision, moving with silent intent, while unseen hands stir leaves and fallen fruit. Crimson Mist Farm, located in the remote hills of Hickory, is a place where the ordinary world feels suspended, replaced by an atmosphere thick with shadow and unease. Once a thriving agricultural homestead known for its rich harvests and sprawling orchards, the farm has long been abandoned, leaving only the skeletal remains of barns, overgrown fields, and groves of gnarled trees. Visitors who tread the mist-laden paths report a series of inexplicable phenomena: shadowy forms pacing silently through the fields, sudden gusts of cold air carrying faint whispers, and an ever-present sensation of being watched. Crimson Mist Farm is more than just a neglected property. It is a space where memory and presence intertwine, and the echoes of lives long past continue to inhabit the land. The first impression upon arriving at Crimson Mist Farm is the thick, rolling mist that blankets the grounds, lending the landscape an otherworldly quality. Even in the light of late afternoon, the orchard paths and overgrown lanes seem to shift and change, as if the farm itself breathes with an unseen rhythm. Guests often report glimpsing shadowy figures moving between trees and abandoned structures. These forms appear humanoid yet indistinct, their edges blurring and folding into the mist. They pace with purpose, retracing steps that visitors cannot always follow, vanishing when approached, leaving behind only a faint rustle of leaves or the soft creak of timber from a long-forgotten barn. The sensation of being watched is nearly constant. As visitors wander the property, a cold awareness seems to brush along the nape of the neck or the small of the back. Trees and ruins loom like silent sentinels, their shadows stretching unnaturally across the mist-covered ground. At times, visitors catch glimpses of movement just at the edge of their vision, a fleeting silhouette gliding across the fields, or a figure stepping behind a tree only to vanish the instant they turn to look directly. The farm seems to respond to presence, as though it has retained the memory of those who once worked and lived there, replaying their routines in spectral form for anyone bold enough to venture inside. Whispers are another frequent phenomenon. Guests hear them in sudden gusting currents of wind, soft and fragmented, rising from no discernible source. Sometimes the voices are faint repetitions of words that seem familiar yet cannot be identified. At other times, they carry a more urgent tone, like fragments of conversations caught between past and present. The whispers swirl around the visitors as they move through the orchard and fields, creating the impression that the farm itself is alive, aware, and interacting with them. The gusts that carry these sounds often bring a chill that cuts through even the warmest evening air, leaving an uneasy feeling that lingers long after the moment has passed. The farm's structures, barns, sheds, and the old farmhouse add to the spectral ambience. In the largest barn, shadowy forms are often seen pacing along the lofts, disappearing into corners where no doors exist. The farmhouse, its windows cracked and weathered, sometimes reflects figures standing inside, only for them to vanish when observed. The orchards and fields themselves seem equally animated. Fallen fruit shifts inexplicably, branches sway in the absence of wind, and shadows move along paths that should be empty. Each phenomenon is subtle, fleeting, and layered into the fabric of the environment, reinforcing the notion that Crimson Mist Farm is not simply abandoned, it is inhabited by echoes of the past. The history of Crimson Mist Farm contributes to its haunting reputation. For generations, the farm was tended by families who cultivated the land with care, raising children and harvesting crops in harmony with the seasons. Over time, the property passed through hands, yet tragedy and hardship left their mark. Local legend holds that the spirits of those who once labored here linger, replaying their routines and marking the spaces where they spent their lives. The pacing shadows, whispering winds, and inexplicable movements are said to be manifestations of these lingering presences, visible and audible only to those willing to step onto the property after dark. Visitors frequently describe being drawn to specific areas of the farm. Certain orchards, fields, or crumbling structures seem to attract the attention of the shadows more than others. Guests often find themselves walking paths they had not intended to take, guided subtly by unseen forces. Some report fleeting interactions, a shadow pausing as they approach, as if acknowledging their presence, or whispers rising directly beside them before fading into silence. The experience is immersive, leaving many with the sense that the farm itself is observing, guiding, and subtly communicating. Crimson Mist Farm leaves a lasting impression on anyone who visits. The combination of pacing shadows, sudden gusts carrying whispers, and the pervasive sensation of being watched creates an environment that is both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Some visitors return night after night, compelled to witness the silent routines of the unseen inhabitants, while others depart quickly, unable to bear the constant awareness of invisible eyes tracking their movements. The farm is a place where the boundary between past and present collapses, where shadows carry memory, and where the ordinary world gives way to the strange and spectral. At Crimson Mist Farm, shadowy figures pace silently across the orchard paths, moving in ways that defy comprehension. Whispers rise unexpectedly, riding the cold currents of wind, leaving visitors unsettled and aware of unseen presences. Trees, fields, and abandoned structures seem to breathe with life, responding subtly to the presence of any guest who dares to wander through the mist. Apples shift on the ground, branches sway without wind, and the mist itself seems to gather around the paths like a living veil. Crimson Mist Farm is not merely a place to walk among trees or explore abandoned fields. It is a living repository of memory, a site where the past continues to manifest in shadows, sounds, and subtle movement. Visitors leave carrying the sensation of unseen eyes following their every step, whispers lingering in their ears, and a deep awareness that some presences, though invisible, are as real as the mist curling along the orchard paths. Here, the ordinary rules of perception give way to something older, subtler, and profoundly enduring, leaving anyone who enters both captivated and unnerved by the silent, watching world of Crimson Mist Farm. Darkwood Orchard, located on the outskirts of Still, is a place that seems suspended between the present and the past. Visitors who wander among the trees often report strange and unsettling experiences. Phantom figures moving silently between the orchard rows, apples dropping without explanation, and laughter echoing across the fields, chilling the air with its hollow timbre. Darkwood Orchard is not merely an empty farm. It is a place where the past lingers, replaying itself in shadows, sounds, and subtle movements. From the moment guests step onto the grounds, there is a tangible shift in the air. The orchard feels alive in a way that is both mesmerizing and unsettling. Shadows stretch unnaturally between the trees, and visitors often catch fleeting glimpses of figures tending the orchard. These apparitions move with purpose, pausing at branches, inspecting fruit, or walking paths as if performing a daily routine long since ended. Their forms are indistinct, fading into the mist when approached, yet their presence is undeniable. Guests describe a sense of being watched, a quiet awareness brushing along the edges of their perception. Visitors may be walking down a path when a fruit detaches from a branch and lands nearby, as if dropped by an invisible hand. Occasionally, clusters of apples fall simultaneously, startling those who witness it. Often, this event is accompanied by a faint high-pitched laugh, hollow and childlike, yet echoing with a sense of menace. The laughter seems to drift through the rows of trees, lingering in the mist, long after the apples have hit the ground. Guests report a heightened sense of awareness during these moments, feeling that unseen eyes are tracking their every movement. Cold drafts often accompany these phenomena, sweeping through the orchard even on still nights. The gusts carry sounds of whispering, faint voices speaking in fragmented phrases that cannot be fully understood. Sometimes these whispers appear to call directly to visitors, uttering their names or repeating indistinct commands. The orchard itself seems to respond to the presence of those who walk its paths, subtly guiding movement and shaping perception. The combination of shadowy figures, falling apples, and disembodied laughter creates an immersive atmosphere, one that is difficult to shake even after leaving the property. The orchard's history sheds light on its haunting. For generations, families cultivated the land, tending the trees and harvesting fruit in cyclical routines dictated by the seasons. Tragedies, untimely deaths, and hardships left a lingering imprint on the land. And local legend holds that the spirits of those who labored there continue to inhabit it. The figures glimpsed among the trees, the apples falling without cause, and the laughter echoing through the mist are said to be the residual energy of these past lives, replaying the motions and sounds of the orchard long after it was abandoned. Visitors often find themselves drawn to particular areas where the activity of the apparitions seems more pronounced. Certain paths, clusters of trees, or corners of the orchard appear to attract the figures more than others. Guests may feel compelled to follow a shadow or be guided down a road they had not intended to walk. The orchard's atmosphere is immersive and disorienting. Even those familiar with its layout often report becoming lost, encountering the same ghostly figure multiple times, or discovering apples in places they are certain had been empty moments before. The orchard's behavior reinforces the sense that it is alive, aware, and subtly interacting with anyone who enters. Shadowy figures tend the trees, apples fall without reason, and ghostly laughter drifts through the mist. Visitors feel observed, subtly guided, and disoriented, walking among echoes of a past that refuses to rest. The orchard is not merely a landscape of abandoned trees. It is a living memory, a place where the labor, routines, and presence of those who once inhabited the land continue to manifest. Each rustle of leaves, each fallen apple, and each chilling laugh serves as a reminder that Darkwood Orchard is alive with unseen forces, preserving the past in shadows, sound, and movement. For anyone daring enough to step within its misty rows, Veilcrest Orchard, nestled in the rolling hills near Asheville, is a place shrouded in mist, shadow, and stories that defy explanation. Visitors to Veilcrest often report experiences that unsettle and disorient, shadowy figures appearing and vanishing among the orchard rows, whispers rising in languages unknown, and a sense of being watched that never fades. This orchard is not merely a relic of agricultural history. It is a living, breathing entity where past and present converge in spectral forms. From the first steps onto the orchard grounds, guests sense that Veilcrest is unlike any ordinary farm. Figures are occasionally glimpsed, moving silently between the trees' dark silhouettes that appear fully formed for a moment, before dissolving into mist. These apparitions are often seen repeating familiar tasks, as if tending to the orchard in an eternal routine, checking branches, inspecting the ground, or pausing beside unseen baskets. Visitors describe a sensation of presence, a quiet awareness that someone or something is observing, guiding, or pacing alongside them, yet always remaining just out of reach. Guests often report hearing whispers, rising suddenly on the wind, but in languages they cannot recognize. The words are fragmented, repeating endlessly in patterns that seem to follow the listener as they move through the orchard. At times, the voices carry an almost musical cadence, harmonizing in ways that suggest a purpose, as if the orchard itself is speaking, recounting events that cannot be fully understood. The combination of whispering voices and moving shadows creates a sense that the orchard is alive with memory, replaying scenes from a distant past for anyone who ventures too far into its fog-laden rows. The orchard's physical features enhance the eerie atmosphere. The rows of trees are tightly packed, with twisted branches forming tunnels that narrow the paths and obscure the view. Visitors moving through these tunnels frequently report that shadows seem to stretch longer than they should, folding around corners, disappearing and reappearing without warning. Even when the orchard is otherwise silent, the faint sound of movement can be heard, rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and soft footfalls that do not correspond to any living creature. The history of Veilcrest Orchard contributes to its spectral reputation. Generations of families once worked this land, tending the trees, harvesting fruit, and raising children among the orchard rows. Tragedies, unexplained disappearances, and stories of hardship have been woven into local lore, leaving a legacy of memory that persists in the environment. Legend holds that the spirits of those who lived and worked at Veilcrest continue their daily routines, replaying them in shadow and sound. The figures glimpsed among the trees and the whispers heard in strange languages are thought to be manifestations of these lingering spirits, performing actions and speaking words from a time long past, preserved in the orchard's atmosphere. Visitors often describe being drawn to certain areas of the orchard more than others. Specific rows of trees, corners near old paths, or clusters of dense branches seem to attract the attention of the shadowy figures. Guests sometimes find themselves walking along a path they had not intended to take, guided subtly by the movements of the shadows or the cadence of the whispers. The experience is immersive and disorienting. Even those familiar with the orchard's layout often report becoming lost, retracing steps only to discover that the figures and whispers appear in new, unexpected locations. The combination of visual and auditory phenomena creates a haunting sense of continuity. Shadowy figures glide silently, repeating routines endlessly, while whispers rise and fall with no discernible source. Cold drafts drift through the rows, carrying the intangible voices and lending a tangible chill to the air. Visitors often feel a pull toward specific spots, compelled to observe or follow the patterns of movement, only to find themselves confronted with the ephemeral nature of the apparitions and the elusive quality of the sounds. Each encounter leaves a lingering impression, a mix of fascination and unease that follows guests long after they leave the orchard. Veilcrest Orchard is a place where perception and memory intertwine. Figures appear and vanish, whispers in unknown languages repeat endlessly, and the mist seems to shift and respond to the presence of any observer. The orchard exists as a threshold between the living and the spectral, a realm where shadows carry memory, sound conveys history, and the ordinary rules of sight and sound no longer apply. Each step along the paths is guided, observed, and recorded by unseen presences, shaping the experience of every visitor who dares to enter the orchard's fog-laden rows. At Veilcrest Orchard, shadows glide silently among the trees. Whispers rise and fall in languages that cannot be understood, and the land itself seems alive with the echoes of lives long past. Visitors feel observed, subtly guided, and often unsettled by the constant presence of unseen eyes and intangible forms. The orchard is more than an abandoned farm. It is a living memory, a repository of shadow. Each movement, each whisper, and each flicker of shadow serves as a reminder that Veilcrest Orchard is not simply a place to walk, it is a place to be watched, followed, and remembered by the unseen. Ashwood Farm, located on the outskirts of Wilkesboro, is a place steeped in history and mystery, where the lines between the living and the spectral seem blurred. The echoes seem to originate both nearby and far away, creating an unsettling sense of dislocation and uncertainty. The shadows and sounds at Ashwood Farm are more than mere tricks of light or imagination. They interact with the environment in ways that are difficult to explain. Figures often appear at the edge of a guest's vision, disappearing when confronted directly. The history of Ashwood Farm provides context for its spectral reputation. Generations of families cultivated the land, tending crops, raising livestock, and harvesting orchards with care. Tragedies marked its history. Sudden illnesses, accidents, and the inevitable passage of time left their imprint upon the land. Ashwood Farm leaves a lasting impression on all who visit. The land is more than abandoned fields and orchards. It is a living memory, a place where the past continues to unfold in shadows, sound, and movement, leaving an indelible mark on all who dare to walk its paths. At Ashwood Farm, shadows flit silently through the groves. Cries echo in the night, and the air holds a perpetual chill that seems to emanate from the oldest trees. The presence of these figures is subtle but persistent, a reminder that Miss Shadow Orchard is not simply empty land, but a realm where the past and the unseen remain vividly intertwined. Auditory phenomena at the orchard are as unsettling as the visual ones. Whispers rise from the orchard floor, drifting through the mist and weaving between the trees. These whispers are often fragmented, carrying unintelligible words, but sometimes they take on a deeply personal quality. A visitor's name repeated in a hushed. Some guests report hearing entire sentences, soft commands or urgent warnings that vanish before they can fully process them. The whispers appear without source or pattern, moving fluidly through the orchard, and creating the impression of a living, sentient presence that observes and interacts with anyone who dares to enter its boundaries. The ground is uneven, littered with fallen fruit and leaves, which occasionally shift without explanation, as if nudged by invisible hands. Mist clings to the low points in the orchard, swirling around the tree roots and obscuring pathways, making it easy to lose one's sense of direction. Visitors describe the feeling of being guided along certain paths, almost imperceptibly, by the movements of shadows or the cadence of whispers, leading them deeper into the orchard than they had intended. The interplay of mist, shadow, and sound creates a surreal environment that blurs the line between reality and perception. Miss Shadow Orchard has a history steeped in both labor and tragedy. Generations of families once cultivated the land, tending trees and harvesting fruit in routines dictated by the seasons. Over time, accidents, sudden illnesses, and unexplained disappearances left their mark on the property, embedding a legacy of memory into the soil, trees, and structures that remain. Local lore holds that the orchard retains these echoes of the past, manifesting them as shadowy figures, performing familiar actions, and whispers carrying remnants of forgotten conversations. Visitors' accounts of figures performing silent, purposeful acts are often attributed to these lingering energies, replaying moments of daily life, work, and unfulfilled intention in a perpetual loop that only the living can observe. Many guests report being drawn to specific locations within the orchard, areas where shadows appear more frequently and the whispers grow louder. Certain rows, particularly those with the oldest trees, seem to hold stronger presence, almost as if they concentrate the memories and energy of past lives. Nightshade Orchard, hidden in the rolling hills of Henderson County, is a place shrouded in mist and mystery. Visitors often describe an unsettling sense of unease the moment they set foot on the orchard paths, a feeling that the land itself is alive, watching, and aware. Shadows move independently of natural light, appearing and disappearing without explanation, while tools and baskets shift mysteriously, as if guided by invisible hands. Nightshade Orchard is not merely a landscape of forgotten fruit trees. It is a place where the past continues to linger, manifesting in the form of unseen forces that interact with all who enter. From the first steps into the orchard, the atmosphere is charged with a tension that is both palpable and inexplicable. Shadows stretch across the rows of apple trees, detached from any visible source of light. Guests often catch glimpses of these dark forms moving purposefully between the trees, pausing as though inspecting the branches or picking up invisible objects. When approached directly, these shadows vanish, leaving the path seemingly empty yet undeniably altered. Visitors describe a sensation of being followed, even when the orchard appears completely deserted. The shadows' movements are fluid and deliberate, suggesting intention rather than mere trickery of the eyes. The physical environment of Nightshade Orchard enhances the unnerving experiences. The trees are old and densely packed, their twisted branches forming natural corridors that funnel the mist along the paths. Fallen apples, broken tools, and abandoned baskets litter the ground, often shifting without any discernible cause. Guests have reported seeing baskets tilt slightly or tools move several feet across the orchard floor, sometimes aligned neatly as though placed with care, other times scattered as if disturbed in haste. The unexplained activity of these objects reinforces the sense that the orchard is alive with unseen presence, and that its spectral inhabitants are actively interacting with the world of the living. Occasionally, a faint rustling is heard, as if someone or something is moving through the branches, unseen yet tangible. The whisper of leaves against each other is amplified, carrying what seems like intentional sounds, a sigh, a distant warning, or the unmistakable shuffle of baskets being carried. Guests often find themselves straining to locate the source, only to realize that the sounds are untraceable, emanating from multiple directions at once. The orchard itself appears to orchestrate the movements and noises, heightening the sense that visitors are not simply observers but participants in a space governed by forces beyond comprehension. History suggests why Nightshade Orchard exudes such an intense presence. For generations, families cultivated the land, harvesting apples and maintaining the orchard with meticulous care. Over time, accidents, untimely deaths, and sudden departures left deep marks on the property, embedding a sense of lingering energy into the soil. The trees and the abandoned structures. Folklore holds that the spirits of past workers, caretakers, and residents remain tied to the orchard, repeating daily routines in spectral form. Shadows gliding through the trees may represent laborers still tending the harvest, while tools and baskets moving on their own might be residual echoes of work never fully completed. The orchard itself seems to preserve these moments, replaying them for anyone willing or unwitting enough to witness them. Guests often report being drawn to particular areas within Nightshade Orchard. Certain rows of trees, especially those older and denser, seem to attract more activity. Visitors have described being guided subtly along paths, feeling compelled to follow a fleeting shadow or step toward a basket that shifts mysteriously. Even those familiar with the orchard's layout can become disoriented, encountering the same figure multiple times or discovering tools and positions that contradict previous observation. The orchard's environment, combined with these spectral interactions, creates a disorienting, immersive experience, leaving guests uncertain where reality ends and the orchard's memory begins. The experience at Nightshade Orchard leaves a lasting impression on all who visit. Shadows that move independently, tools and baskets shifting without explanation, and the sense of being guided through the rows create an atmosphere both mesmerizing and deeply unsettling. Guests often feel the presence of unseen eyes tracking them, a quiet but persistent awareness that their actions are observed. Even after leaving, the orchard's influence lingers in memory, coloring dreams and heightening sensitivity to ordinary shadows or sounds. The orchard's activity is subtle yet profound, shaping the visitor's perception and leaving an indelible sense of interaction with a world that exists just beyond the normal plane. Nightshade Orchard is more than a forgotten farmland. It is a living memory, a repository of past lives, labor, and unresolved energy. Visitors feel observed, subtly guided, and sometimes unnerved by the persistent sense of presence, aware that the orchard itself remembers every footstep, every pause, and every attempt to unravel its mysteries. And lights are suspended, leaving guests to navigate a world where the past is never quiet and the unseen is ever present. At Nightshade Orchard, shadows are not simply the absence of light. They are actors performing routines long since ended. Tools and baskets are not merely objects, they are vessels of memory, moved by unseen hands in perpetual repetition. Guests may walk the paths, but the orchard walks among them, guiding and observing, whispering names, and replaying the echoes of labor, life, and presence. It is a place where the past is tangible, the unseen is active, and every step is accompanied by the weight of countless unseen observers, leaving visitors to confront the silent persistence of history itself. Hollowvale Farm, tucked away in the quiet hollows of Hickory County, is a place where the night takes on a life of its own. Visitors often feel the moment they arrive that the farm is not merely empty land, but a realm alive with unseen presence. Figures appear near the tree lines after dusk, always at the edge of vision, as if observing from the shadows, performing unknown actions just beyond comprehension. The wind carries faint laughter and soft crying that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing across the fields and clinging to the dense foliage. Hollowvale Farm is not just a place of history, it is a place where memory, sorrow, and unseen eyes linger long after the last living caretaker departed. The first step onto the farm immediately immerses visitors into an atmosphere heavy with anticipation and unease. The long grass whispers beneath each footfall, and twisted branches creak and groan in the night wind. Shadows move independently of the natural sources of light, darting along the tree lines or gliding across the fields in a way that feels deliberate and intentional. Guests often catch fleeting glimpses of these figures, a silhouette pausing to watch, bending near a fence post, or disappearing behind a copse of trees. When approached directly, the figures vanish, leaving no trace. Yet the sense of their presence remains, a lingering tension that prickles the skin and quickens the heartbeat. The sounds at Hollowvale Farm are as disturbing as the visual phenomena. Visitors report faint crying, often soft and mournful, carried on the wind, as if the farm itself is breathing in sadness. At other times, gentle laughter rises among the trees, distant yet unmistakably human, echoing along overgrown paths and abandoned structures. These sounds appear to originate from multiple locations at once, impossible to locate definitively. Sometimes the crying and laughter overlap, creating a haunting chorus that seems aware of those wandering the fields, subtly interacting with them, responding to their presence with an eerie rhythm. Guests describe the experience as both mesmerizing and disorienting, a reminder that Hollowvale Farm is alive with echoes of those long-gone physical elements of the farm amplify its spectral qualities. The old barn, weathered and leaning with age, casts elongated shadows across the fields, and the tree lines themselves form natural corridors where mist often gathers. The wind picks up in these areas, moving through branches and around fallen logs, creating the illusion of motion even where none exists. Visitors sometimes report the feeling of being gently nudged, guided, or observed as they walk, as if invisible figures are steering their path or deciding what they are permitted to see. The farm's layout, combined with the shifting mist and shadowy figures, creates a disorienting experience in which ordinary landmarks become unfamiliar, and familiar paths seem to bend into unseen spaces. Hollowvale Farm has a history that seems to explain the intensity of these encounters. Generations of families worked the land, raising crops and tending livestock with tireless dedication. Life was marked by routine, and yet tragedy was never far from the property. Sudden illnesses, accidents, and unexpected deaths left emotional imprints that, according to local lore, continue to resonate across the farm. Shadowy figures performing silent actions are often interpreted as echoes of the past. Caretakers tending trees, children playing near the barns, and families moving along the fields in daily routines long since ended. The wind carries fragments of these moments' soft cries, laughter, and whispered phrases, allowing visitors a glimpse into a living memory frozen in the land. Guests often notice that certain areas of Hollowvale Farm are more active than others. The edges of the tree lines, the oldest apple orchards, and the weathered barnyard frequently host the most distinct figures and sounds. Shadows linger longer here, sometimes appearing to watch visitors from a distance before vanishing suddenly. Laughter and crying may rise from the orchard floor or drift from the barn, often seeming directed at specific individuals, echoing their movements or responding to their presence. Visitors who pause, intentionally or accidentally, often find themselves drawn deeper into the farm, encountering figures repeatedly or witnessing the same sounds replayed with subtle variations, as if the farm itself is aware of their attention and reacts accordingly. The lasting impression of Hollowvale Farm extends far beyond the night spent wandering its fields. Guests report feeling followed long after leaving, a quiet but persistent sense of observation that colors ordinary sounds and shadows in daily life. Dreams are frequently touched by the farm's echoes, shadowy figures among tree lines, soft crying in empty rooms, laughter drifting across misted paths. The presence of Hollowvale lingers in memory, creating an uneasy awareness that the farm continues to watch, remember, and interact, even when physically absent. Hollowvale Farm is more than an abandoned property. It is a living archive of emotion, memory, and spectral presence. Figures glide silently along the tree lines, performing unseen actions. The wind carries cries and laughter, sometimes comforting, often unsettling, linking the present with echoes of the past. Visitors feel observed, drawn, and subtly guided, navigating paths that seem both familiar and impossibly transformed. Every step across the fields, every glance toward the shadowed tree line, is met with the weight of countless unseen observers, all tied to the farm through memory and the remnants of lives once lived. At Hollowvale Farm, shadows are not simply the absence of light, they are witnesses, caretakers, and echoes of the past. Laughter and crying are not merely sounds, they are fragments of life replayed, resonating through time and space. Guests may walk the orchard paths, but the farm itself moves among them, silent and watchful, leaving an indelible impression of a world in which the past is never fully gone, and the unseen is always near, waiting at the edge of vision and in the whispering wind. Final Haunted Orchard Farm, hidden deep within the rolling hills of North Carolina, is a place that few dare to explore after dusk. Visitors often report the sensation of being watched from every direction, as though the very orchard itself is aware of their presence. Shadowy figures pace endlessly between the trees, always at the edge of vision, moving with deliberate intent. Cold gusts sweep through the orchard, carrying whispers that seem to come from every branch, every hollow trunk, and every patch of undergrowth. Those who linger too long quickly realize that Final Haunted Orchard Farm is more than a forgotten field of trees. It is a stage upon which lost spirits replay their lives' tragedies and regrets, silently observing any living intruders who dare to remain until nightfall. From the moment a visitor steps onto the orchard grounds, the atmosphere is charged with tension and unease. The air feels heavy and cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and decaying fruit. Shadows flit just beyond peripheral vision, moving as though they are alive. Guests describe seeing figures pause among the trees, turn abruptly, or vanish entirely when approached. These are not mere tricks of light. The movements are purposeful, almost deliberate, giving the sense that the orchard is inhabited by unseen beings with awareness and intent. The sounds of Final Haunted Orchard Farm are equally unsettling. Cold gusts ripple through the rows of trees, often accompanied by soft whispers that repeat fragments of conversations, names, or long-forgotten phrases. Sometimes, the whispers are mournful, echoing cries of despair. Other times, they carry the sharp edge of anger or frustration. Guests report hearing the rustling of unseen bodies moving through the undergrowth, the soft snap of branches under weight that is never visible, and and the occasional jingle of tools baskets, pruning shears, and forgotten implements shifting, as if tended by invisible hands. The orchard seems to exist in a state of perpetual activity, replaying moments long past as a haunting loop, ensuring that the living are never quite alone. Visitors often notice that the activity intensifies in certain parts of the orchard. The older trees, with gnarled trunks and thick low-hanging branches, seem to attract the most spectral attention. Figures appear to pace slowly along the aisles, lingering near spots where fruit once fell or where workers labored. Shadows move with precision, pausing at intervals as though performing tasks unseen. Some guests report feeling compelled to follow these figures, drawn deeper into the orchard by an invisible force that subtly guides their movements. Even the most confident explorers find themselves disoriented, as familiar paths seem to bend and loop in ways that defy logic. The orchard's history adds depth to its eerie presence. Generations of families tended these trees, harvesting apples and maintaining the land with careful hands. Yet tragedy was never absent. Accidents, untimely deaths, and sudden disappearances left deep emotional imprints on the property. Local lore holds that these events trapped the spirits of the deceased, binding them to the orchard and its rows of trees. Shadowy figures are believed to be these restless spirits, performing the work they could not complete in life, or replaying moments of personal sorrow. The whispers that drift through the branches may be fragments of unfinished conversations, pleas for help, or cries of loss. Guests often find that their experience is not passive. Those who linger until nightfall report feeling observed from all directions, aware of multiple unseen presences. The figures in the orchard sometimes appear closer than expected, or vanish when approached, creating a sense of being followed without ever seeing the pursuer. Objects on the ground, fallen baskets, tools, or even apples sometimes move without explanation, shifting position or rolling along the rows as though pushed by invisible hands. The repetition of these occurrences, combined with the audible whispers and the constant presence of shadows, reinforces the impression that the orchard itself is alive with memory and intent. The effect of spending hours at final haunted orchard farm lingers long after leaving. Guests often report dreams haunted by the orchard's figures, whispers that replay in the quiet of their homes, and an uncanny sensitivity to shadows and sounds in ordinary life. Even daylight cannot fully erase the sense that Hollowvale is still watching, still moving, and still preserving the stories of those who came before. Shadowy figures glide silently between the trees, their movements deliberate and observant. Cold gusts sweep through the orchard, carrying whispers, cries, and faint laughter. Objects move without explanation, and visitors are subtly guided along paths that twist and loop in ways both natural and impossible. Those who enter are not mere observers. They become participants in a landscape governed by memory, grief, and spectral presence. At final haunted orchard farm, shadows are not just absences of light, they are echoes of the past, guardians of forgotten lives, and silent witnesses to tragedy. The whispers that drift through the branches are more than sounds, they are remnants of moments long ended, replayed endlessly for anyone who dares to remain. Visitors may walk among the rows, but the orchard itself moves around them, observing, guiding, and reminding all who enter that some places are never empty, and some lives never truly leave. These are North Carolina's haunted orchard farms, where moving shadows glide among trees, whispers echo through the branches, and unseen presences follow every step.